What does the BLA want at this point?
Pakistan, which has declared an emergency in Balochistan, is suppressing the news. The Baloch are known to be determined suicide attackers. Without prisoner exchange, the hostages, many of them, are going to die.
The Balochistan Liberation Army hijacked a train going to Quetta in Pakistan. There were 463 passengers, allegedly including Pakistani military officers, police officers, and ISI operatives. 27 militants have been killed so far, 12 soldiers have been killed, and the condition of the more than 250 passengers still believed to be on the train is unclear. Now, the BLA warned that any military intervention would lead to the execution of all hostages. They have reportedly demanded the release of Baloch political prisoners, activists, and missing persons abducted by the Pakistani military. What does the BLA want? To discuss this further, I'm being joined by Professor Brahma Chellaney, Professor of Strategic Studies at Center for Policy Research. Professor, thank you so much for joining me here. I had spoken with a retired Pakistani army officer earlier in the day who mentioned that BLA have made demands, but he refused to share more on this. What does the BLA want at this point?
First, it's important to keep in mind that Pakistan, which has declared an emergency in Balochistan, is suppressing the news on the train ambush. So we do not know what exactly is unfolding at the scene. We still do not know how many Pakistani military personnel were on that train. So it's largely an issue which the Pakistani state is seeking to manage. But it's clear from the train ambush that the chickens have come home to roost for Pakistan. The Balochistan problem has been festering for decades. We should not forget that accession created resentment among the Baloch people over the loss of their independence. And to make matters worse, over the decades, the Pakistani state has increasingly marginalized Balochistan. Balochistan is Pakistan's largest and most resource-rich province. And yet, the Baloch have been increasingly marginalized, which has then, in turn, created unrest and led to the emergence of groups like the Baloch Liberation Army. So, the neglect and the marginalization of the Baloch people is something that is coming back to haunt the Pakistani state. And it's obvious that without reversing this marginalization, there's no way the Baloch problem will disappear.
Professor, what you mentioned earlier, and I also felt the same when I spoke with the retired officer from the Pakistan Army a little earlier in the day. He said that the BLA have made demands. He did not want to speak on it. He said, I do not wish to speak on it. At this point, it's clear that Pakistan doesn't want the news to really come out of Pakistan. From that, what do we gauge about how bad the situation really is there in Sibi?
The fact that the BLA has publicly demanded a prisoner exchange, we know that from the BLA's own statement, underscores the gross human rights abuses that have resulted in enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and torture, with thousands of Baloch rotting in jails. So the Baloch group is demanding that those who have been forcibly disappeared and those who are rotting in jail be freed in return for the hostage takers releasing their hostages. The problem is this, that because the Pakistani state is suppressing the precise news, the precise developments. For example, there's a complete ban on reporting on what the BLA is demanding. So the outside world is sought to be kept in the dark on what exactly is happening And in fact, what the attempt is being made to plant misleading stories, to say that the Baloch separatists are holding women and children. The fact is that they released all the women and children. They are only holding the men. They claim that many of the men that they're holding are military personnel, but we do not know for sure because of the news censorship by the Pakistani state.
Professor, at this point, how do you reckon the Pakistani forces will be handling this case? The military officer I had spoken with earlier said that they do not wish to get into any kind of exchange with the BLA fighters. The BLA has reportedly positioned suicide bombers wearing suicidal vests very close to certain number of hostages. This is as per reports, but the number of attacks and the volume of these attacks, the way they have increased, it leaves little chance for Pakistan to really get into, catering to their demands or any kind of an exchange, because the BLA is carrying out repeated attacks going forward. So at this point, given the scale of this current siege, how do you feel Pakistani forces will be tackling this one?
The Baloch problem has arisen or intensified because of heavy-handed Pakistani military operations in Balochistan. And these operations have further alienated the Baloch people and fueled the insurgency. And since that train was ambushed, the Pakistani military has been carrying out air attacks at the scene. But they are suppressing the news on that. So given the fact that they are they're doing exactly what has created the present situation, one can be sure that this particular crisis will not end in a way the Pakistani state would like. The Baloch are known to be determined suicide attackers. They will be willing to sacrifice their lives if the Pakistani state is not willing to trade prisoners. It's very clear that without prisoner exchange, the hostages, many of them, are going to die at the hands of the Baloch separatists who are holding them. But there is a larger thing that we should not forget. In addition to the human rights abuses in Balochistan has been sought to be extinguished by the Pakistani state. The Baloch people have a distinct ethnic and cultural identity that differs from the dominant Punjabi population of Pakistan. Now, apart from Punjab, Pakistan today faces unrest in all other states, all other provinces. Balochistan is only one example. Look at the northwestern frontier province, or look at Gilgit-Baltistan, or the discontent in Sindh among the Sindhis. So apart from Punjab, and even in Punjab, there is discontent between the dominant northern Punjab communities and the marginalized people who live in the very south of Pakistani Punjab, especially in the Multan area. So much of Pakistan today is experiencing discontent and unrest, and this is largely because of the fact that the Punjabi elites of Pakistan tend to rule the country as if they are colonial rulers. They're trying to rule in the British colonial style, and that exactly is the reason why the Baloch people feels not only marginalized, but some of them have taken to arms. Because the feeling in Balochistan is that the Pakistani state is exploiting the rich natural resources of Balochistan, but keeping Balochistan underdeveloped and marginalized. If you look at Balochistan's representation in the government, in the bureaucracy of Pakistan, in the military, in the police services, one understands why there is such deep resentment to the Pakistani state.
Professor, at this point, one of the statements which came in from the BLA was also that they stand extremely against the Chinese presence, especially in Gwadar, with the CPEC in operation in this region, making the most of the resources from this region, while the BLA residents, at least Baloch residents, I would say, they remain marginalized. At this point, do you feel a Chinese exit from this region can put the BLA at rest? Because the Balochistan region has only become more and more restive in recent times.
Today, the Pakistani state sustains itself with Chinese help. For decades, it was the US that propped up Pakistan. Now it's the People's Republic of China that props up Pakistan. And the Chinese presence in Balochistan is part and parcel of Pakistan's exploitation of the resources of Balochistan. In the exploitation of natural resources, the Chinese are playing an important role, both in terms of capital investment as well as bringing their own people to start projects, to mine resources there. The Chinese are involved increasingly, and the Chinese footprint in Balochistan has become so entrenched as to incite the Baloch separatists to attack Chinese targets as and when they can find Chinese targets. So we have had a series of attacks on Chinese targets, including Chinese citizens. And this will continue because of the fact that China and Pakistan are inextricably linked. And this is very clear, especially in Balochistan.
Professor Chellaney, we are still trying to gauge exactly what comes out of Pakistan at this point, because clearly the exact details are only trickling out at this point through different kinds of reports. What is exactly happening on ground? There seems to be a concerted effort to keep that under wraps unless and until this is finally solved from the Pakistani forces. We'll need to wait and watch how this one comes out. It definitely seems one of the worst siege that Pakistan has seen in recent times. There was Professor Brahma Chellaney joining me on a game plan. We will be tracking the developments closely coming in from the Balochistan province at this point. Thank you so much for joining me, sir.
Thank you.